Hello, dear students. I welcome you all on behalf of Sri Jayendra Rank Zone classes. Dear student, we are in a continuation of the chapter that is transporting plant. And in the previous some of the classes, we have already discussed about the short distance transport in plant. And now today, from this lecture, we are going to discuss a long distance transporting of water or in plant. Means we are going to talk that how water and long and food. First, we will talk about the long distance transport of water, and then we will talk about the food. So, how water and food transport from one plant organ to the another plant organ through the xylem and phloem respectively that we have to discuss. So, to discuss that long distance transport of water, when we take a twig which bear a white flowers, simple thing. If we talk about a simple experiment, if we take a twig, means short piece of segment of stem which has a white flower, and if it is placed in a colored water, the color of the flower changes into respective color solution. Means if we have kept it in the pink solution, the flower will take a white flower will be converted into the pink color. So you can see here it is a blue color solution is there, so the flower is converted into blue color, and it is in red color, so it is converted into red color. Okay, when we have kept in them in a particular solution. So on examining the cut end of the twig, if we take a twig with the flower and we examine the cut end, after a few words you will notice that a region through which the colored water moved, you can observe a cut section and you can see the region through which the water absorbed. So this experiment very easily demonstrated that the path of water movement is through the vascular bundle, more especially the xylem. Means if we take a twig and if we see this end, you will see some portion here which is somewhat colored, another is not colored, then that will depict us that the transport is occurring through the vascular bundle. And here you can see in this diagram specifically, which is showing that suppose this is the phloem, okay, and if you take a cross section, you will see this particularly phloem become colored. Means they are showing a full transport. So here xylem show the particular transport from root to the leaf or upper aerial organs, whereas a full transport occur from the leaves to the other plant organs. Okay. Now, long distance transport of a substance within a plant cannot take place by diffusion alone. Means diffusion is within the cell or from one cell to another cell. Like this, the long distance transport cannot occur because the diffusion is a slow process and it will not be able to transport the substances from one plant organ to another plant because diffusion account for only short distance movement of molecules. So to carry out transport of water from root to the aerial organs, there is a need of a vascular bundle. And if we take an example, the movement of molecule across a typical plant cell about 50 micrometer takes approximately 2.5 seconds. So 2.5 seconds to cover a 50 micrometer distance. So it takes many years for a movement of molecules over a long distance by diffusion alone. Because through diffusion only 2.2 in 2.5 seconds they will cover only 50 micrometer distance. So it will be difficult for a plant to carry out a movement to this long distances by this diffusion process only. So in large and complex organism, substances often move across very large distances. Like you can see there are some gymnospermic plant like sequoia, which is a too much heighted plants. In that also transport of water is occurring. So how this is taking place, that is the one of the important question that should be discussed here. And to discuss this, sometimes the site of production and the site of storage are too far from each other. So at that place also the diffusion and active transport would not suffice or they will not be able to carry out this transport. So special long distance transport system become necessary to carry out this long transport from the production site to the requirement site or storage site. And for this, the special systems are necessary so as to move substances across a long distance at a much faster rate. So for that, if we talk about the to one organ to another one or one longer distance, the water, minerals, and food are generally moved by a mass or a bulk flow system. Means all this move by a bulk flow. So this is one of the important question you can get in exam, that which of the following can show a bulk or mass flow system. So we remember it is applicable to water, mineral and food, because all these three components move in a mass. But in the end, we will discuss that a mass flow hypothesis is mainly explained for the food. Yes, but if they ask that the mass flow is of which component can occur, then you will answer that water, mineral, and food all. Okay. So this is the mass flow hypothesis. We will discuss this in the later part. Even we will discuss a flow and transport. Okay. So mass flow is the movement of substance in bulk. In bulk, a movement is occurring from one point to another as a result of a pressure differences between the 2 points. If 2 points have a pressure differences, and due to this, the particularly mass flow is happening. So if there is a one concentrated solution and a dilute solution, okay, if source is this is the source, it has a sugar and it is a sink, then the sugar will transport from here with the water, and water carries the sugar, and then the dilute solution will reach, the sugar will reach here. Okay, so this is the from concentrated to a dilute concentration. So one pressure difference for one pressure point to another pressure point, the mass flow will occur. So it is a characteristic of mass flow that substances, whether in a solution or in a suspension, are struck along at the same pace or transport at the same pace as in a flowing river. So, like a flowing river, the molecules of water, mineral, and food are going to transport in a long distance transport or mass flow. And this is unlike diffusion, where different substances move independently depending on their concentration gradient. Different substances have a different movement, but here they will move in a mass. So, bulk flow can be achieved either through a positive hydrostatic pressure gradient. If we take an example of garden hose, if you take a garden hose and if you remove a water, suppose if you are taking a garden hose and if we fill it with the water, and if we provide one outlet, and from this water allow water to go outside, then the pressure which is developed here, that will be the positive hydrostatic pressure. So positive hydrostatic pressure is due to presence of water. The high water has a high hydrostatic pressure, whereas the negative hydrostatic pressure gradient will be on a particularly and when the water is absent. So suction through a straw, we know that in a straw initially there is a no water. So negative hydrostatic pressure simply means the absence of water. If there is a water is absent in the straw, okay, if water is absent in the straw, then there is a negative hydrostatic pressure. But water is here, so it has a positive hydrostatic pressure and it has a negative hydrostatic pressure. So when a water will move, it will move from a positive to the negative hydrostatic pressure. Okay, and hydrostatic pressure is also known as turgor pressure because it is also due to the water. So the bulk movement of substances through the conducting one on vascular tissue of a plant is called a transduction. Okay, so bulk movement of substances through the conducting or vascular tissue of the plant. So when a conduction occurring through the xylem or phloem vascular tissues, then it is known as translocation. And we know that in higher plant, they have a highly specialized vascular tissue, that is the xylem and phloem. And we know that xylem carry out a transport of mainly water and minerals. So xylem is associated with the translocation of mainly water, mineral salts, some organic nitrogen, and hormones from the root to the aerial parts of the plant. This you should remember. They will ask a question that which component move through this xylem. So mainly water, minerals, some organic nitrogen, not inorganic, organic nitrogen. Okay. So it is not that inorganic molecule will move through xylem. Organic can transport. Some hormones will also grow from the root to the aerial parts of the plant. Whereas similarly, and in this xylem, the xylem vessel and xylem trachea are going to help. But if we talk about the phloem, the phloem translocate or transfer a variety of organic and inorganic solute mainly from the leaves to the other plant of the plant. And organic nutrient means here they are talking about the food, and that is transporting from a leaf to the other plant of the part. And then this is the important one for the, you should remember that not only organic, inorganic solids are also translocated through the phloem. So if we talk about some of the questions, the movement of molecules across a typical cell by a diffusion takes approximately, we have discussed that it takes 2.5 seconds for a 15 micrometer movement. And water and minerals are transported through, they are particularly transported through the mass or bulk flow system, okay, through the xylem. The bulk movement of substances through the conducting or vascular tissue of the plant. So it is conducting to the vascular tissue, that is xylem and phloem, then it is known as translocation. So third going to be the correct answer. So you should remember translocation is transport through the xylem and phloem. Okay, so now what tissues are required, how the transport is going to take place, what is long distance transport, how it differs from the diffusion, that all this we have discussed. Now to transfer a water from a root to the aerial parts, first water need to be absorbed from the soil. So when it is absorbed from the soil by the root, how do this plant absorb this water through the root, that we need to understand. And to understand that how do plant absorb water, we have to talk about the different components. So the responsibility of absorption and water minerals is more specifically a function of root hair. So absorption of water and mineral is carried out by the root hair, and which are present in millions at the tip of roots. You can see this is the root, and at the root tip you will see the number of root hair are present. Okay, and root hair, we know that they are the extension of the root epidermal cells. Because of this, root hairs are unicellular, exogenous in origin, and they are arising from the root epidermis. The root epidermis is also known as piliferous layer or epiblema or rhizodermis, that also we have discussed. And from the epidermis, this unicellular extension will occur from the epidermal cell, which are a root hair, and that are going to absorb this water and mineral. Now, root hairs, if we talk, they are thin-walled, slender extension of root epidermal cells, as we have discussed. And due to this extension of epidermal cells, they greatly increases the surface area of absorption. See, you can see here, this is the epidermal cell. Okay, this is the epidermal cell, and this is the soil particles. Now, this epidermal cell extension will occur along with the vacuole. So water minerals ion are absorbed from this root hair. These are the exogenous in origin or unicellular extension. Same way, this is also, you can see this is a root hair through which the water and mineral are going to be absorbed. Okay. So water is absorbed along with the mineral solid. Water is not going to be absorbed alone. They will take along with it the mineral solids, and that are absorbed by a root hair by a purely by a diffusion. Through diffusion, they are going to absorb. Once water is absorbed by the root hair, it can move deeper into the root layers by a distinct pathway. But first, it has to be reached to the what epidermal root hair. When root hair absorbs it, it transport is either through the wall of this epidermal cells or either through the what a cytoplasm of this wall. So based on this, the two distinct pathway of transport of this water and minerals towards the xylem, that is carried out by the apoplast or symplast pathway. And if you want to understand this, suppose we can say, suppose this is a plant. Okay, now this has a root, and this is the root hair. Now in the center you will see the xylem. So now if this is a root hair, water reached from here, it has to transport through this up to the root hair, and here it has to cross the several layers. And here when it crosses the several layers to reach the xylem, it has to cross the epidermis, cortex, endodermis, and pericycle. And when these four tissue layers are crossed, then it will reach to the root xylem. So absorption through root hair from the soil. After absorption, the passing from epidermis, cortex, endodermis, and pericycle, it will reach to the xylem. How it will reach from epidermal cell to the xylem, root xylem, that will be explained by these two pathways, that is apoplast and symplasma. Now, what occur in this apoplast and symplast pathway? Let's discuss. So, first, if we talk about the apoplast pathway, the apoplast is a system of adjacent cell wall that in continuous throughout the plant except at the Caspian strip of the endodermis in the root hair. So we know that cell wall is a continuous system and adjacent cells, cell wall of adjacent cells are closely associated with each other. So are they are forming a continuum throughout the plant except this Caspian strips in the endodermis cells. So in apoplast, what will happen? The water will pass from root hair through the cell wall intercellular spaces and ultimately is reaches to the root xylem. So you can see this is a cross section. This is epidermis, this is cortex, and this is stele. In stele, you will see this is the endodermis. This is the pericycle, and this is the phloem. And inner to phloem, there is a xylem. So here, thus apoplast, you will see that this is a particular intercellular spaces and cell wall through it. It is reaches here, and then from here, Caspian will not flow. So from some points they will enter and ultimately reach to the xylem. So when the water get transferred through or passes through this particular cell wall intercellular spaces, it is known as apoplast. So apoplastic movement of water occur exclusively through the intercellular spaces and the walls of the cell. Okay. So this movement is dependent on the gradient. Means if the water and minerals are more on the epidermal side, then and less on the xylem side, it will move. So this is dependent on the gradient and movement through the apoplast does not involve crossing of the cell membrane. In this, the cell wall membrane is not going to be crossed. So in apoplast movement, you can see this is going to the cell wall, this is going to the cell wall. Okay. So this movement through the apoplast does not involve we can say the crossing of cell membrane because it is occurring through the cell wall and intercellular spaces. So the apoplast does not provide any barrier because it is not going to cross the cell membrane. So it does not provide any barrier to the water movement and water movement is through the mass flow. So you can see this is the thing that is the apoplast pathway. It is occurring through the cell wall, but it will take place up to the what Caspian strips are encountered. It will continue up to then it will get a Caspian strip. The transport will stop. So this is the apoplast pathway. Okay. So now in apoplast, we have discussed what it is, how it take place, what are the important force. Now the question is, what is the driving force for the apoplastic movement? So if we discuss, we remember in apoplast, energy is not consumed or ATP are not used. So it is passive transport. Okay. But for passive transport also there should be a particularly we can say the mechanism or a driving force. So if we talk about the mechanism or driving force for driving force for apoplastic movement, then you will see that as water evaporates, as water evaporates into the intercellular spaces, intercellular spaces or atmosphere, then tension or negative hydrostatic pressure. Negative hydrostatic pressure develop in continuum stream in continuous stream of apoplast or xylem vessel. Hence, mass flow occur and the water is getting absorbed and transported from the xylem and through to the apoplast movement. So this negative hydrostatic pressure which develop in a continuous strip of Apollo or xylem vessel that is responsible for the what particularly absorption for this passive transport. But the another system is the particularly we can say the simplest. So now let's talk about the simplest part. Okay. Now in simplest pathway, the neighboring cells are connected through the cytoplasmic strands that extend through the plasmodesmata. We know that cell wall in a continuum, but if we want to connect it to protoplasm or cytoplasm of the two neighboring cells, the plasmodesmata is considered as a cytoplasmic connection. And through this, the cytoplasmic strands pass, which connect it to cytoplasm. So simple plastic system is the system of interconnected protoplast. And when through interconnected protoplast the transport occur, it is known as symplast. So what we have discussed in the apoplast? This apoplast, when the particular water get absorbed through this cell wall, then it is known as apoplast, and that is will occur up to the Caspian strips. But when we talk about the symplast, in symplast the water will be entered here, and if there is a presence of vacuole, either it go inside the vacuole and come out of the vacuole and then get transported, or by leaving the vacuole it can through transport can occur through cytosol only. Same can happen here, that is through the vacuole or without the vacuole. Here also it can occur through the vacuole or without the vacuole. Here also it can occur through the vacuole and without the vacuole, and ultimately it reaches to the xylem. So in symplast, when it occurring to the protoplast or continuum, this is the plasmodesmata. So through this it is occurring, and it is crossing epidermis, cortex, endodermis, and pericycle cells. Here the casparaceous will not hinder the transport because they are present in cell wall, and this symplast is occurring through the protoplast. Now, if we talk here symplast, you can see here this is the symplast, and in this symplast you can see that the transport is occurring. Water is absorbed in the root hair cytoplasm, and then it is transport is occurring through the cytoplasm up to the xylem. So it is a simplest way. Now, so now during a symplastic movement, water travels through the cells and in cytoplasm, and that is intracellular movement is through the plasmodesmata. Means from cell to cell, the movement will occur through the plasmodesmata and through the cell cytoplasm. Then it is known as symplastic movement. So this is the plasmodesmata through which the water will move, and it will be through the protoplasm that it is a symplast. So water has to enter the cells through the cell membrane. Hence, the movement is relatively slower in the symplastic movement because the membrane will act as a barrier. And movement is again down pressure gradient or potential gradient, obviously. Symplastic movement may be aided by a cytoplasmic spring, means a movement of cytoplasm or cyclosis or cytoplasmic spring also help in the symplastic movement. It also provide a push. So cytoplasmic streaming or cyclosis in the cells of hydrilla leaf, the movement of chloroplast due to the streaming is easily visible. You can see here these are the chloroplasts which are moving in the cytoplasm. They are visible clearly. And most of the water flow in the root occur via apoplast since the cortical cells are loosely packed. So the intercellular space is more and hence they offer no resistance to the water movement. So most of the water flow in the roots occur via apoplast. So this is the important point that you should remember. Now, however, the inner boundary of the cortex and the endodermis is impervious to water. However, the inner boundary of the cortex and endodermis is impervious to water because of a band of suberized matrix called the Casparian strips. That is, the endodermis will hinder a water transport because they have a Casparian strips. And these Casparian strips, you can see, these are the present in the particular endodermis cells, which does not allow the water transport. So water molecules are unable to penetrate the layer, so they are directed to a wall regions that are not suberized into the cells proper through the membrane. So the cells which do not have the suberin deposition, they are known as passive cells and through which the transport is going to occur. So water then moves through the symplast and again crosses the membrane to reach the cells of xylem. So according to NCRT, dear student, we remember that NCRT says that when Casparian strips are encountered, the apoplast will follow symplast and the further transport will through occur the cytoplasm. But it is not usual like this always because there are passive cells in the endodermis which do not have a suberin deposition and that through which the transport can occur. So movement of water through the root layer is ultimate symplastic in the endodermis. It is according to the NCRT. Remember. So this is the only way water and other solids can enter the vascular cylinder. That is a xylem. Okay. So this way the particular symplastic movement can occur. Okay. So this is the symplast. So symplast through the cytoplasm or protoplasm and apoplast through the cell wall and intracellular spaces. Now, once the through the apoplast or either through the apoplast or the symplast, once the inside the xylem water is moved, it is again free to move between the cells as well as through them. So this is the xylem vessels through which the transport can occur. In young root, some important facts are that it is observed that in young root, water enter directly into the xylem vessel or a tracheids. Okay, and we know that this tracheids and vessels are non-living conduit or non-living elements, so are a parts of the apoplast. Okay, so this will be considered as a part of apoplast. Some plants have a additional structure associated with them that help in water absorption and mineral absorption, and that is mycorrhizal association. And we know that mycorrhiza is a somewhat a symbiotic association of fungus with the roots of higher plant, that is gymnosperm and angiosperm. And when a fungus associated with this mycorrhiza like this, it will increases the surface area of absorption. And due to the increase in surface area of absorption, the minerals and water are provided to the plant, and specifically minerals which are not easily available that are also provided to the particular roots of the plant. So the fungal filament either form a network around the young root or penetrate into the root cells. You can see. So the hyphae have a very large surface area that absorb mineral ions and water from the soil and from much larger volume of soil that perhaps a root cannot do. So root which cannot do, the hyphae can help in the absorption of mineral ions and water from the soil. Okay, and it also help for the absorption of some water and some minerals which are not easily available. Okay, so the fungus provides some minerals, particularly phosphorus and water to the roots. In turn, root will provide a sugar and nitrogen containing compound to the symbiotic. So both are giving to each other. Because of this, it is a symbiotic association. And some plants have an obligate association with the mycorrhiza, and some have facultative. So, for example, if we take a pinus example, we know that pinus seeds cannot germinate and establish without the presence of mycorrhiza. So, to germinate the pinus seeds, there should be a presence of mycorrhizal association, and that is the important. See, this is the pinus seeds. Pinus have a seeds, winged pericarp. So, winged seeds are there. So, this is what symplast and apoplast. and important information regarding to this. Let's discuss some of the few easy questions. Which of the following statement is incorrect? In mycorrhizal association, fungus provides sugar and nitrogen containing compound to the root, and root provided minerals and water to the mycorrhizal fungi. It should be incorrect because which one? The fungus provide particularly fungus provide the nitrogen containing, not nitrogen containing, minerals and water to the, particularly fungus provide these minerals and water to the plant root, and root will provide a sugar and nitrogen containing compound. So this should be reversed. Arcade is a part of a plast. Obviously, it is correct. Mycorrhiza help absorb mineral iron from the soil. Obviously, pyrite it cannot germinate out of this. So first is the incorrect one. The simplest include protoplast, plasmodesmata, cell wall, intercellular spaces. So it should include a protoplast and the plasma membrane. So it should be 1 and 2 because cellular and intercellular spaces are the part of apoplast. The mycorrhiza is a symbiotic association of the fungus with the root of the higher plants. Okay, so this is what about the apoplast and symplast, and that is the particularly uh, how do plant absorb water, and that is a long distance transport, bulk flow, all these things we have discussed. So apoplast and symplast are over, and water is now from the soil through the root hair ultimately reached to the xylem. Now what is our load? We have to take this water from the root xylem to the upper plant, means that is a water movement up a plant. That is the next topic that we will discuss in the separate lecture. Okay, I hope you understood this apoplast and symplast. Thank you everyone.